No, I think you're right, and I'm glad you said this because I really want this kind of discussion in this class. This is the other part of it, besides that technical stuff, is the social stuff. And in fact, I had a survey. I'm glad you reminded me. I want to start with this survey. So you'll have to go to my website to do it, those of you that are willing. And I would just like to see what you say here. I put a poll here. There's just a poll. And if you go here, here's a few questions. And I would like to see what people say. Like, what political party do you prefer, for one thing? So just go to the 160 page and go to the top, and there's a link called poll. So click on that. And there's a few questions to answer here, and I'd like you to do it even if you're the online students. Everybody, pick a party and tell me how secure you feel online.
Are you using blockchain behind it?
There's no blockchain. No, this is just some free polling servers. And I think it does some effort to prevent double voting, although probably if you use Tor or something, you could. And then how much? So I'd like you folks to answer this, and then I'm going to, if you see the results, do we have too much government surveillance? And do you trust Google? And what do you use for news? So I'd like you to answer this. I'll wait a few minutes. The way you get here for people who just showed up is you go to 160 and go right to the top. There's a link called poll. So I'd like some people to answer this, and let's see. Ask another option?
News. Source of news.
News is completely different.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a source of news.
Oh, in fact, I didn't, yeah, using me for news. I'm just a content curator. I go to these other ones. But anyway, I'm interested in what people would like to say here. And I don't know, maybe I'll have to wait till next week to see enough results to have anything here. Let's see. Nope, yeah, it looks like nobody's, all right, I'll wait till next week. I'll leave it up till next week and maybe we'll get some answers by then. Anyway, that's one thing I'd sort of like to know. And I'm hoping we can get a diversity of opinion here. But anyway, let's talk about US versus China. I based this on a podcast. This is fantastic. Intelligence Squared Debates. They had a debate discussing the recent US policy towards China. As you know, we have been doing things really drastic with China, mainly the tariffs. And some people think that's a great idea and some people think it's terrible. And so they got some really illustrious people. These are people that think it's good. This guy from the Hudson Institute and this person from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. These are illustrious people that think that what's happening between the US and China is good. And here's people that think it's bad, from Harvard and from a national security advisor to Joe Biden, of course, so Democrat. These are people who think we should not be doing what we're doing. And so here's the basic pro-argument. China is not apparently going to become a liberal democracy like America, as if anybody thought it would. And so they are pushing a hostile agenda to American values, and they are totally continuing to steal our property and lie about it, which I think is undeniable. And the tariffs are in fact hurting China to punish them finally for all this campaign of theft against us. And they're developing cyber weapons, and we have to react with strength to protect ourselves. That's the agenda, that's the position of people who think we should be doing what we're doing in China. And here's con, we should be getting along like you were saying, we shouldn't be fighting, we should be working together. The trade policies are just hurting people, hurting us as much as them, just making everybody miserable. And all we're doing is escalating tensions with a powerful adversary and likely to start something awful like a war this way. That's the other side. So here's, in general, everyone agrees in this debate, and China is the issue of our time, and I think they should. America is in decline. We are losing our empire. It's a huge global shift, and I don't think anything we can do can stop it. China is going to be the next superpower. They have a lot of people, they have a lot of technology, they have a lot of intelligence, and we can't possibly keep up with them. They are going to be the next, they're going to rule the world pretty soon. And so we have a contest of models. If the Chinese model continues the way it's going, that's bad for democracy. It will be dictatorship, essentially, ruling the world. Yeah?
With the way it's going, would it be like long-term superpower for China?
Yes.
Longer than the US?
Oh, well, now that's a big question. Will China be a superpower and dominate the world longer than America? I do not know that. I would guess not, because my feeling is things keep speeding up and up and up. And like Britain was able to dominate the world for a couple centuries, and we were able to dominate it for maybe 50 or 80 years. And I think time keeps going faster and faster. But certainly for the next several decades, I think China will rise to be the world's superpower the way we are, and we will sort of be dragged around by them. Anyway, so they're in competition. We have two opposing models. We've got our liberal democracy, and they've got what they've got, which is essentially a dictatorship. And that's, so Taiwan, so here's one of the huge issues. Taiwan is a gigantic issue for China. And America and China argued about this forever, and they finally made a deal with Henry Kissinger under Nixon, and the deal was the one China principle, that there is only one China, and Taiwan is part of China, but the United States wants to pretend that Taiwan can be separate, and so does Taiwan. And so the deal was that we will just not talk about it. The United States wanted Taiwan to be separate, an independent nation. China very much didn't want to do that, so they made a deal in 1972 to never talk about Taiwan and pretend it didn't exist. And for 50 years that has held, that we will just never mention it. There is only one nation, China, and Taiwan doesn't exist. And therefore, China doesn't have to claim it, and the US doesn't claim it either. But Trump blew it. Trump took a congratulations call from the president of Taiwan and then reported, the president of Taiwan said thanks to me. China was a disaster. He admitted that Taiwan existed, which was the rule to never say this. And Trump, of course, just said it because he always says the one thing you're not allowed to say. That's his whole shtick. And people freaked out. And the question is, what's China going to do? Go to war? And what's actually going to happen is not much. So in essence, you can say Trump did the right thing. I mean, now the rules have changed. Apparently we can exist. You can admit that Taiwan exists and the world does not come to an end. So Xi Jinping, Xi came to America and he promised that they were not going to militarize these new islands they built, which was totally a lie. So they did it. They totally don't honor their promises. They keep telling us they're not hacking us, and they're totally hacking us. They promised to stop stealing our intellectual property, and then they totally steal it. And so there's a lot of provocation coming from China. Now, Trump is much sharper than Obama was, or any president in a long time with China. And so his position is we need to start a fight here, and we need to force our allies into stepping up and paying their share. Our allies have gotten used to us doing all the work and paying for all the military and not supporting us. And so the people who are supporting Trump's position say, even though he is needlessly antagonizing our allies, in fact, his brutal techniques have caused our allies to spend more on defense and help us more. And they say the good thing about Trump is he's going to stir the pot and get our allies to move. And then when he's out of office and we have a different president who is more professional, we can restore the injured feelings of our allies. So this was kind of an interesting point in the debate, how even the people defending Trump say, well, the good thing will be after we get rid of him. Because, you know, you can't really defend Trump too much. There's a lot of Trump Trump's like an acid. You can't have too much of that out there. Anyway, the Trump is driving up the cost of China. He is hurting China with what he's doing. So then there's infrastructure and immigration. And so this is the people that say we are not helping with the current situation. He says we're not investing in ourselves. The United States is cutting the science and research budget. We have 0.5% is our GDP devoted to industrialization, to research and development. And in China, it's like 6%, which is, of course, in the United States, we have a lot of private investment in science and research, but that's not the same because private investors, because of the fiduciary duty of corporations, only care about making money this quarter. They don't have the money to invest in something that will take 10 years to come to fruition. And so it's an argument. And of course, the other thing that the people opposed to Trump say is his immigration policy, which is extremely controversial and hard to take. And they say, you are not letting people immigrate who would bring in intelligence and enthusiasm and scientific power. They say we should have many more H-1B visas. There's a bunch of people who could bring in a lot of technical and scientific expertise that aren't allowed in the country because of our extreme xenophobia. And that is contrary to making us strong to compete with China. And that is their position.
Actually, there's a small difference on that.
Yeah.
There's an episode of 60 Minutes about MIT or somewhere.
Yeah.
But there was a program where they're doing all the research, and their research, whatever they find, is like sold out, and the first 6 companies who put money into the original program as a member gets dibs on whatever they created.
Well, I don't know about that.
That was a article. That was a episode that I heard that there was a program at MIT or something that companies put in to be like a group member or something, and whatever research that they find or product they create, those first 6 companies get dibs on whatever is created.
Oh yes, I know what you're saying. This is a way for private companies to be incentivized to do fundamental research. You're right, and this is this is something I'm often upset about at the college here. You can partner with private business now as a college and get money. This used to be considered illegal, but it's not anymore. And it's one way to pay for things. But anyway, so that's one issue, is immigration. Another one is alienate our allies. A lot of people highly criticize Trump for pulling out of the TPP. The TPP was Obama's plan to make a negotiated partnership with China and have some control over the financial activities in the Asia sector, and Trump pulled out of it. And some people say he shouldn't have, and some people said they should have.
What was his excuse for pulling out?
Who knows? Who knows why Trump does anything? What's that? America first. Well, sure, but exactly what that means is not clear. Anyway, so he certainly made a lot of argument with our own allies, like putting tariffs on Canada and the Germans. And the Germans now more Germans believe that China is a trustworthy partner than the United States. And this is a huge issue. Trump is so erratic and inconsistent that people are very nervous at dealing with him. You can't tell what's going on. And this is America's image. If you look, Chinese leadership is now more respected globally than America's. And that is certainly due to Trump. His craziness has really caused America to be seen unfavorably in Asia Pacific and elsewhere.
Wait, what's the deal with Canada? Because they're cheaper drugs?
He decided something about steel. Something about lumber and steel. He put tariffs on and punished them for not buying enough of our lumber or something.
Also have a problem with lumber too, Canada lumber.
Yeah. Anyway, and then Huawei is a threat to national security, which is, but then the next day, it's fine. He keeps on forgiving them and giving them another 90 days to not be considered a threat. Then the Chinese say, he said we're going to stand in solidarity with the protesters in Hong Kong, which would really be rock the boat. But the next day they're saying, oh no, that doesn't matter. And then he trusts the one China policy. Then he says it's fine. And the Chinese are baffled. How do you negotiate with this guy? What does he want? What side is he on? This is his style too. He was just explaining today that his random inconsistent actions at the G7 summit are part of his negotiating strategy of keeping people guessing by changing what he says every day. He's not ashamed of this. He sees it as a strength, and his supporters do too, I think. I've had some of them come to me and say that. So that's confusion. The Chinese is confused by Trump, and they don't understand what he wants and who he is and how to deal with him. And of course, the people underneath him, like Pence, just contradict him because they can't keep up either. And this is a mighty strange way to run a country.
Because every other president was predictable, right?
Yes, certainly every president in living memory. Andrew Jackson might have been like this, but we haven't had one in a long time this weird. Anyway, and here's another issue, Grindr, which I thought was pretty interesting. I learned about. I didn't know this, but I just learned Grindr, of course, is the gay dating app. And Grindr was bought by China in January. A Chinese company bought Grindr, and everybody freaked out because that means they can blackmail all the gay people with the knowledge of their secret gay affairs. And so in March, the United States began trying to force China to sell Grindr, and they agreed in May 2019 to sell it back to America. So you can see this as a success of Trump's hardline policies. If you like, he did manage to get Grindr back from China. Anyway, so I thought you might be interested in that, and I'm happy to see the comments that have come out. And if anybody got any more comments, I'd like to hear them.
Just theories.
What's the theory?
It's just theories. So
these are two positions. I don't think there's ever any conclusion to be drawn. I must say, in the debate, they actually had an audience, and they decided that the against Trump side won, because the pro-Trump side, the number of people on that side went up by 10%, and the other side went up by like 20%. So in this debate, by the rules of debate, the people opposing Trump's policies won. And we will see in the next election, I'd say, whether the country at large feels like supporting Trump or not. But other than that, I think there is no simple answer.
What would happen to Russia when you leave Russia out? I think Russia is not more capable.
Oh, well, Russia is, of course, another big issue. I'm only focused on this one issue here, but Russia is another big issue. And we'll be talking about that in future classes. Any other? I'm going to.
Actually, the one China is a result of the Korean War. It's not in the same.
Oh, okay, but the American.
Korean War amid China into the UN, United Nations, and then they kicked out Taiwan. That was a time stuff.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. That is good. All right, I'm going to stop the share, and I'll post these videos up separately. This is as far as I go to have two different topics because there's the technical, there's the management stuff, and then there's the political stuff, and I try to keep them separate. Anyway.
Different recording, right?